18-year-old twins Tom and Lance Bailey were leading a happy, quiet life with their parents in St. Paul, Minnesota, when a chilling discovery would completely change their lives and make them rethink everything. Tom and Lance had just finished high school, both with impeccable academic excellence, and were about to make a big change in their lives. The greatest adventure a teenager can live and never forget: going to college. Both were outstanding students and had been admitted to good universities, but while Tom was a lover of letters and literature, Lance could spend hours between numbers and complex scientific formulas. So they would share a university, but would pursue different careers. To celebrate, the twins' parents, Jonas and Amanda Belayoff, African-American descent, decided to throw a big party with family and friends at their home. It was impossible to imagine that this celebration would end in tragedy. In the last weeks of school, the twins' friends had raised money to give them a very special gift that they were sure would make them very excited and cause a sensation: a DNA test that details your ancestry and allows you to find out where your most distant relatives came from. It was a trend that had become fashionable to influencers on social networks, revealing their ancestry. Their friends thought it was an original and fun gift that would not offend anyone. In fact, before requesting the tests, they consulted with Mr. and Mrs. Bailey so that there would be no problem, and they applauded the idea and thought it would be really fun to check where their families came from. They would soon realize how wrong they were, and all their excitement would turn to anguish. The party started with British punctuality at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The garden was perfectly decorated with a large giant banner congratulating the twins on their graduation and their new university adventure. All the guests were sitting in their seats around the more than 20 tables spread throughout the garden, and excitedly awaiting the arrival of the hosts. Shortly after, Tom and Lance appeared accompanied by their parents and were greeted with a standing ovation, and the celebration was underway. Everything went as expected, until it was time to give the gifts. Gifts were given on a small makeshift stage in the center of the action, along with a sound system with which each gift was announced, and the twins said, "Thank you." All the gifts were received with applause and cheers, all but one. When it came time to give the last gift, tension was palpable in the air. It was evident that the twins' high school classmates were anxious to deliver their gift and learn about the ascendancy of their dear friends, but things did not turn out as they had hoped. Tom and Lance were both extremely surprised to receive the DNA certificates and thanked their friends for the gift as they read the document. However, when Tom began to read aloud into the microphone his ascension, Lance's face suddenly paled. Lance snatched the paper from his brother's hand and began to read the document at full speed. Something did not fit, and the young man seemed to be looking for some proof that he was mistaken, and that it was only a reading error on his brother's part. But it wasn't. Everyone looked at them with gestures of confusion, but before the twins' father could ask what was going on, Lance announced it loudly. "We don't have the same ancestry. How can that be possible? We don't share the same genes? Dad, Mom, can you explain to me why on my paper it says that I am descended from an African family, while on Tom's paper it says that his direct ancestry is Nigerian?" Lance exclaimed in disbelief and glared at his parents fiercely. The sound system was still running and Lance hadn't bothered to drop the mic, so everyone present clearly heard the chilling revelation that one of the twins had just made to his family. A tense silence fell over the room as the twins' parents looked at each other nervously, not knowing what to do or say to their children. It was clear that they too did not understand why their children's DNA tests had different results. "Honey, calm down, please. You're making a spectacle of yourself, and I'm sure it's a lab error. Please drop the microphone and let's talk privately for a moment," suggested the mother, trembling with fear. The twins agreed and went inside the house to talk to their parents. Meanwhile, in the garden, the music was loud again, and the guests continued to talk and eat snacks, although none of them could forget what they had just heard, especially the group of friends who had requested the DNA test as a gift, and who now feared they had made a very serious mistake. Once inside, the twins' parents carefully examined the documentation and could see the mistake to which Lance referred. However, neither of them wanted to make a big deal out of it and suggested filing a lawsuit against the lab for the mistake. "I am your mother. I carried you in my womb and saw you being born. I have no doubt that you are my children and that you are brothers and sisters. I don't care what that stupid analysis says. We should never have agreed to carry it out. It is an absurd gift," said Mrs. Bailey, very indignant. Lance seemed to agree with his mother and failed to find any reason to refute her. It was true. Both he and his brother had been born naturally. The house was full of their pictures since they were born, and they had even seen the ultrasounds. They were twins, there was no doubt about it, but the analysis seemed to say otherwise. "We will call the lab tomorrow and file a claim. Don't give it any more thought. Now, enjoy your party," their father announced optimistically, accompanying his children to the garden so that the party could continue. That night, neither of the twins brought up the subject of the DNA results again, and they just enjoyed the big party that their parents and friends had organized for them. They managed to have fun and forget about it until the next day, when both twins woke up restless in the early hours of the morning, unable to stop thinking about the possibility of not belonging to the same family. "You can't sleep either, can you?" Tom asked his twin brother as he filled himself with a glass of warm milk. They had both woken up nervously and had gone down to the kitchen to get something to help them get back to sleep. "I can't stop thinking about those damn DNA tests. The results didn't seem to be wrong. I did some research, and the lab they ordered them from is the best in the country. I don't think we are their first mistake. Didn't you notice that Mom was very nervous? I think they are hiding something from us, and I'm not willing to sit idly by. We are adults now, and that means we can make our own decisions," said Lance with a cutting tone. "And what have you decided?" Tom asked, intrigued. "I'm going to go to the hospital where we were born and ask them to repeat the tests. If the results there are correct, I'll forget about it and assume it's a mistake. But if the hospital results come back negative, we'll have to face reality, little brother." Tom swallowed hard and said what they had both been thinking for hours, but dared not say out loud. "The possibility that we are not brothers. I can't imagine a world where you and I aren't brothers, but I'm not going to stand here and not know either. Come on, let's go." The twins went to the hospital without telling their parents. After all, they were adults now and could request a DNA test without their parents' permission, so there was no obstacle to their plan going wrong. They made an appointment with the family doctor, Dr. Neil Birch, who was very surprised to see the twins there, unannounced and unaccompanied by their parents. In fact, it was the first time Tom and Lance had ever been to a hospital without their parents, so they were as puzzled as the doctor. "Is something wrong, guys? Are you unwell?" asked the doctor, very confused. But the twins had no time to be polite and got straight to the point. They requested a new DNA test and waited impatiently for the results. Dr. Birch was not very cooperative and even tried to dissuade them from conducting the tests, but neither would listen to him and went ahead with their plan. Upon re-entering the office, the doctor greeted them with less friendliness than before, and his face showed concern. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the time they had been waiting for the results in the waiting room. "I don't understand what could have happened, but your DNA results don't match," said the doctor, handing them the tests which clearly showed that Tom and Lance were not brothers, not even related. Tom and Lance looked at each other without understanding what was happening. They read the results, and sure enough, they did not share the same DNA. They were not even close relatives. How could that be possible? Their mother claimed to have carried them in her womb and watched them being born. But blood is not deceiving, and the paper was very clear. Tom and Lance were not twin brothers, but then, what were they? The minds of both began to go very fast, thinking of all the possible causes that could have caused this disaster. Was it one of those cases of stolen children they had seen on television? Had their parents paid to pass them off as their children to keep up appearances? The questions kept piling up, and it was getting harder and harder to find the answers. I can only advise you to seek the help of a lawyer. You will need it. We will do the same, the doctor muttered, interrupting the twins' thoughts and breaking the awkward silence. Hearing the doctor say that, Lance had a bad feeling and asked the most obvious question. Do you have anything to do with this mistake? You are listed as the doctor who delivered my mother's babies 18 years ago. Am I wrong? You saw us being born, doctor. Tell me then, how is it possible that we are not siblings if you saw us being born from our mother's womb? Lance asked in a defiant tone and approached the doctor. The doctor recoiled, and suddenly his tone changed. The friendliness and joviality that had been his custom for so many years had vanished, giving way to a scathing and threatening tone. As I have already told you, get yourself a good lawyer. I will say no more without mine present. That is all. Now go on. I have a lot of work to do, he replied, approaching the door to indicate to them that his visit was over and that he did not intend to have any friendly conversation with them. The twins left the office more confused than they had arrived and very angry at the doctor's attitude. But they didn't want to get into trouble and decided to return home to explain to their father what had happened. Why did you do that? That man could sue us for threatening him at his job. Do you really think the doctor could have anything to do with the fact that we are not brothers? Tom asked suddenly as they walked towards the subway station. Didn't you see the look on that guy's face? He's gone from being the smiling doctor to a jerk trying to save his own ass. That man is hiding something, and I'm determined to find out. Lance told him with a somber face. The young man was furious. Tom stopped dead in his tracks and grabbed his brother by the arm. Are you aware of what this means? Are you prepared for what is going to happen now? I want you to know that you will always be my twin brother. I don't care what those tests say. You are my brother, my family, the person I love most in the world. I need you to know that before I take the next step, said Tom, visibly moved. The brothers gave each other a big hug and returned home to talk to their parents and set in motion the whole legal process that would change the Bailey family's life completely. And maybe someone else's. After discovering that Tom and Lance were not biological twins, and with the certainty that the hospital was hiding incriminating evidence on the matter, their parents contacted a prestigious family lawyer to help them solve the mystery surrounding the birth of their children. We will need to find some evidence that we can use to put pressure on the hospital and the doctor who attended you during delivery. But it is not easy. Doctors and nurses are usually very protected, and it is almost impossible to get to them. But that's what I'm here for. Don't worry. We will find a way, explained the lawyer. For their part, Tom and Lance did the same, but their way of seeking help was a little different, adapted to the new times, posting a video on social networks. If you want someone to know about something, upload it to a social network. It's the fastest way to get things done. Trust us, Mom. Lance told his mother when she was furious that her children had publicly disclosed their family problems. But what happened a few hours after posting the video caught them completely by surprise. The video went viral on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook, receiving thousands of messages of support and solidarity within hours. But that wasn't the most surprising thing. Among the comments, more cases began to appear of twin brothers of African American descent who had exactly the same thing happen to them. They had taken the famous DNA test in the wake of the new social media trend, only to discover later that their entire lives were based on a lie. My twin sister and I are in the same situation as you. Courage. The hospital will have to pay for its mistakes sooner or later. You are not alone, said a young woman who had recently discovered that she and her twin sister did not share the same DNA. My family is devastated. We will fight with you in court, said another boy. And so on. Up to 50 more cases related to the same hospital where Tom and Lance had been born 18 years earlier. While investigating and talking to the rest of the affected children, they discovered a pattern that could advance the investigation. All the affected children were of African American descent, and none of them was older than 24 years old. Dr. Birch had been working in that hospital for 25 years. He was the longest-serving doctor, an eminence in his work who was respected and feared in equal parts. But if what all those twins were saying was true, and there was no doubt that it was, the doctor's reign was going to come to an end very soon, and when it came to light what he had been doing, he would have no allay left to hide behind. The video of the twins ended up reaching the media, and once there, everything accelerated. The hospital could no longer hide evidence nor protect its doctor, and opened an internal investigation while preparing the case to be taken to court as soon as possible. The pressure was too great, but Birch was not about to give up so easily. He had an ace up his sleeve that would buy him a little more time and divert media attention. During the trial, Birch testified that he was not alone, and that all this time he had had help swapping the children without anyone noticing. Apparently, the nurses were not as innocent as they claimed, and all the nurses who had worked with the doctor were aware of his deceptions. In return, they received a generous amount of money and were assured of a decent retirement. And why did you do it? Nurses for money and fear. It makes sense to some extent. But what about you? What drove you to destroy the lives of so many African American families? Asked the judge, intrigued. The doctor's face showed no sign of concern or fear. His eyes were cold, and he smiled in a sinister way that gave chills. Because an African American ruined my life first. My wife was run over 24 years ago by a black man. He rammed her with his car, and then said it was her fault. The police listened to him, because witnesses claimed that my wife crossed when she shouldn't have, and the car was traveling at the speed allowed. The case was closed, and no one seemed to care in the least about my loss, or the life of my dear wife Angela. Now justice has been done. I have seen to that. It's only fair, Birch explained, looking around the room with a menacing gesture. The hatred he felt could be seen in his eyes. The entire room shuddered at that confession. The Bailey family could not believe that their entire lives had been in the hands of such a man. A deranged man, someone so consumed by the pain of the loss of his wife and the resentment of not having been able to give her justice that he had forgotten who he was and what his true purpose in life was, to save lives. It would have been easier to know that the reason he stole children from their families was money. Money is usually the most likely cause, and explains almost all the mistakes that are made, especially the most serious and unlikely ones. But this was a personal vendetta, and all those exchanged twins were collateral damage. The trial was long, stretching up to 6 months, but finally the truth was known and justice was done. More than 20 nurses and up to 5 other doctors were prosecuted and immediately dismissed from their jobs. Even one of the former directors of the hospital was implicated in the case and had received bribes from Dr. Birch. A terrible plot of corruption and evil whose only goal was to do as much harm as possible to African American families. Once again, the country was struck by a racist tragedy that had little or nothing to do with grief over the loss of a loved one. Dr. Phineas Birch had acted on his instinct, and the death of his wife in those tragic circumstances was the trigger to free himself from false appearances and act as he wished, as a racist would act. For their part, once the case was closed and the police gave the families access to the hospital records in search of their real families, the Bailey twins found what they were looking for. They discovered that on the same day Mrs. Bailey went into labor, another African-American couple entered the hospital to welcome their twins, a Nigerian-born couple who had been living in Minnesota for 20 years. Upon seeing the file photos, the Baileys recognized the family because they had also been witnesses during Dr. Birch's trial, and were in the same quest for answers as they were. After seeing that, the twins knew they had found their other twin brothers from whom they had been unjustly separated at birth and planned a date to meet. Their names were Cameron and Gael Williams, and as soon as they looked into each other's eyes, the 4 twins felt an immediate connection that only those who share blood ties can feel. But the most surprising thing was not that they met, but to learn that for almost 20 years, the Baileys and the Williams had been less than 5 kilometers apart and had never seen each other. The Williams twins went to high school 3 blocks down the street from the high school the Baileys went to. They were almost neighbors, and they didn't even know it. Perhaps, if they had seen each other before, they would have known that something strange was going on because the resemblance between the twins was uncanny. The inbreeding between them was undeniable. Gail and Tom had the same features and eye color, while Lance and Cameron barely differed in hairstyle and height. This was their new family, and now that they had found each other, they would never be separated again. Do you like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.